This program is made possible by funding from the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, where government leaders, business executives, and academic experts come together to discuss major issues facing the state of Florida.
Hello and welcome to UCF Metro Center Election 2012. I'm Diane Trees, Director of the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, and your host for the evening. This fall, we're bringing you a series of political discussions in an effort to help you decide at the polls. Metro Center Election 2012 is brought to you by WUCF, Central Florida's home for PBS, in collaboration with the League of Women Voters. Tonight, we kick off a two-part look at age in the election. An unprecedented amount of young people came out to the polls in 2008, but is the millennial enthusiasm still alive 4 years later? Joining me tonight to discuss the youth vote are Salvator Mastra, author of 2012 For Twentysomethings, and Cynthia Florentino, a political science student at UCF. Salvator and Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
Sal, you mentioned in your book that you had seen the 2012 elections more as important than ever before. Why did you think that?
Well, right now in our country, we're at a turning point, and if we don't make a decision this election on which direction we want to go, we have so many things in the balance, like the economy and jobs. You have entitlements that are on the edge. Which way are they going to go? Are we going to save them? Are we not going to be able to save them? Is Congress going to be able to act? You have health care. What's going to happen with that? If Romney gets elected, is it going to be repealed? If Obama gets reelected, will it stay in? And how will Obamacare affect health care in the future? And there's just so many different parts of our country that are just right on that tipping point, and they can go either way. And so this election is so important to see where this country is going to go.
So the plethora of issues and problems right now have sort of reached a peak.
Yep, they're
Cynthia,
all at the peak.
What do you think about that?
I completely agree. I think our economy is at the main issue of right now, and I think young voters see that whatever decisions they make now will affect them in the future. Whatever happens or doesn't happen is going to have a long-term effect on them.
So it is a pivotal point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are an estimated 45 million Americans between the age of 18 and 29. How powerful is the young vote?
It's very powerful. I mean, like you said, there are millions and millions of young voters, and I think this election is the first election where they will outnumber the senior vote, which makes them a huge voting bloc. But the problem is that the enthusiasm has waned since 2008, and will they show up in the numbers they did in 2008? And so they can be a huge influence on an election, but it only depends if they have the enthusiasm behind it to show up to the polls and really make their voice heard.
Well, you do make a point. In 2008, 18% of the national turnout for voting was the younger voting segment. So are you seeing that difference in the amount of enthusiasm among your peers and colleagues now?
Well, 2008 was called the year of the youth vote. I don't know if we will see that again. We'll have to see. But I think that the enthusiasm is there. It just needs to be woken up. The issues have to be very pressing, and the youth has to realize what is at stake here.
Do you think that that changes as we get closer? I mean, we're going into just the last final weeks, maybe with the debates. That will keep stirring things up a little bit.
Yes, the debates, I think, are definitely going to help with the enthusiasm. It's getting young voters to turn out and watch those debates to get them excited, and I agree the enthusiasm is still there. The problem is neither candidate is really out there trying to, rile up the youth vote and get them excited. They're not presenting anything to young voters that makes them believe in anything like hope and change in 2008. There's nothing like that out there right now, and so it remains to be seen if they will show up in the numbers they did in 2008, but as of right now, no candidate has really come forward to energize them.
Cynthia, the polls are projecting a less amount of voters for your voting segment, your age. Mm-hmm. Now, with the idea that nothing's changed in the last 4 years in Washington, and potentially nothing will, no matter who's in office, do you sense that degree of cynicism or disenchantment with your fellow?
I certainly do, and it's sad. When I ask people, are you registered to vote? Would you like to update your address? And I get the response, no, I'm not interested in politics, or that's not for me. you should how do we make the youth understand that yes, politics is for you because it affects everything in your life and your lifestyle. So that's one thing, but disenchantment does play a key in that. From 2008, they might feel that nothing has happened or their lives haven't been completely turned around by any of that, so they might feel, this isn't working out, I'm just not going to cast my vote.
Yeah, a lot of my friends who I talk to, and a lot of young voters I talk to, are not interested at all in 2012. They were all in 2008, they got absolutely nothing out of it. And so why go back again and stand in line to vote for someone who promised so much and did so little for them? And so I think that's the enthusiasm
gap. So the disenchantment is a part of that. Now, one thing that is very striking about millennial voters is the diversity, and that's with religious beliefs, ethnic, racial. How did your backgrounds shape the voters that you are?
For me, I think my background encompasses everything that my political ideologies today are. And I think I speak for a lot of the millennials when I say that. We all, according to how our social surroundings are, we tailor our ideologies towards that. And that's why it's very common to see young voters align with liberal ideologies and that sort of thing. And that separates us also from the other age groups, our lifestyles and what we have been seeing and what we have not been seeing so far.
What do you think?
Yes, I agree. We've been brought up, our generation has been brought up in a country, in a world where, you know, we're supposed to be accepting of everything and everyone. And so I think that fits into how we vote and what party we align with. And yes, young voters have identified more with Democrats over the last few elections. And that's what you've been seeing, you know, because we're brought up to, you know, love everybody and bring everybody in, and that's what the Democratic Party is kind of about, more social issues. And it'll be interesting to see if that plays out this election when the focus is more on the economy.
Well, what do you think are the top 3 priorities for Generation Y voters?
I always sound like a broken record when I talk about this because I just keep going jobs, jobs, jobs. Young voters want jobs. The unemployment has gone up since 2008 among young voters, and so it's very important for them to, once they graduate from college, is to have a job to pay back those student loans. And so, you know, if I was going to consolidate all that, I would say, you know, jobs and the economy are very important. Then you have student debt, which is the next major one that both candidates have yet to give any answers on. And so those are the 2 main things young voters are passionate about and what will make them show up in 2012.
Cynthia, what do you think?
I have to agree, especially I think the jobs portion is directly related to student debt. A student has so much debt before they hit 25, and then you're thinking, well, I'm gonna graduate and I'm not gonna have a job. What's next? I don't want to default on my loans. It's things like that push. So whatever they do previously during their college careers, tuition and fees, I know it's a really big thing, especially for state schools, public schools. Budgets have been going down, tuitions have been rising. That's a pressing issue for today's youth.
What about, now you mentioned that the candidates aren't necessarily delineating all of the specifics on what some of the issues you'd like to hear. Does that change with the age group, or are you seeing that just over the board on the issues you're not getting the responses that you want to hear?
Yeah, I'm not getting the responses that I want to hear, and young voters aren't hearing anything that is really, I mean, I do think Governor Romney has presented a pretty good jobs plan. He has pretty good points every time he speaks, and during the debate he made a good case for his jobs plan, but it has been overshadowed by Obama's attacks on that. So the young voters, I think, are more confused this election than anything else. I remember watching TV the other night, and every ad during the commercial was a political ad, one pro-Romney, then pro-Obama. So it's very confusing information out there, and I think it's just a very confusing time for young voters when it comes to those important issues because they're both saying different things.
Yes. Cynthia, what?
That's true, and also I feel like sometimes the candidates, they might say something and then you know that they said that, and then they come around and they say something else that doesn't align with what you'd heard before, so then they're just left confused, and it's back and forth banter. So it's just
banter without a substance.
Exactly.
Yes.
It leads us nowhere.
Yes. Let me ask you, why do you think the younger voting segment is different than any of the other voting blocks? And I'm very curious because I had an immediate answer when I read this question. What do you think? Cynthia first.
I'm going to have to say that diversity. Diversity plays a big role. everyone might be, there's first generation young voters, there's all these cultures, different religious beliefs, races, ethnicities, everything. But we all come together under one nation, and whatever we decide affects all of us equally, regardless. So that's something that's really big.
So the diversity.
Social media as well. I don't know if you would like to take
Salvator,
that.
what do you think?
Yes, I think social media is one of the major things that sets us apart, even though that has spread into the upper age groups as well. But you have social media out there, and you're constantly inundated with information after information, just constant, all this news coming in. And where's that news coming from? It's who are you following on Twitter? Most of people in our generation are obsessed with celebrities, so they're following celebrities, and celebrities are mostly liberal, and they're tweeting out their ideas and stuff on the election, and those are most likely not true and are skewed. And so I feel like young voters are getting misinformation rather than, accurate information.
Now, you mentioned briefly the social issues and the diversity. Social issues in the past, like same-sex marriage and abortions, have really been dividing factors among age groups. Do you see that as such a key for this year's elections?
I would say it plays a role, but I wouldn't say it's key. I don't think social issues are going to be key. I think right now, and we saw it last week in the debates, economy. Economy is the hot topic, and it's going to keep being the hot topic until something gets done.
Jobs, jobs, jobs. That's all it's going to be about. And even though President Obama did come out in support for same-sex marriage, I don't think that's going to give him the bump he needed, because those people who are in favor of same-sex marriage, we're going to vote for him either way. So I think that the social issues this time around for young voters aren't going to play that big of a role as they have in
It
previous
sounds
elections.
like the issues like the economy and the jobs are crossing all across the age groups, and that's not young voters or old voters.
No.
It's a uniting factor almost with things with that. Yes. Salvator and Cynthia have both made some excellent points. Let's take a quick break from our conversation and see what some of Central Florida's young voters had to say about this year's election.
This year, the issues that matter to me most are
probably jobs.
Make sure we don't collapse the economy.
More work, more money in the economy.
and education and like funding for education.
School is a really big issue
Financing school.
because there are a lot of students that can't afford to go to school.
I use the GI Bill.
A lot of people have to have an education, and that's very important.
Without financial aid, I don't think I could be in school right now. I don't have it like that.
I'm kind of into stem cell research.
Definitely the LGBT community, the stances on that.
I'm going to vote for the president that'll most benefit my family.
When it comes to a president, the qualities I'm looking for is dedication, hard work.
Honesty.
Somebody that's consistent, back up their word.
Someone who understands that it's not just a business. America isn't just a business.
Help support everybody.
Not just saying whatever they want to like make people think that that's what they believe. Someone who understands the people, understands all aspects of the country, and could do a good job in running it.
I'm looking to see a lot of change.
And that I can tell that they're actually working towards something.
Consistency and want to see change and just do better.
And determination to get this country in a better shape and to help with the economy.
Now let's get into the issues that are key for this election. Now both of you, your generation is going to have to work longer and harder to have a comfortable retirement. With that challenge coming to you in the future, how are you looking, how does that impact the way you look at the economy right now?
It impacts us a lot, I think. You have, like I mentioned before, the problems with entitlements and how those are teetering on the edge, and what are we going to do about that? And so all of those issues with entitlements and Social Security that we'll be paying into, are they going to be around for us? Are they not going to be around? What is going to be different between our generation and our parents' generation when it comes to retirement? And no one knows that right now because we don't have anyone who's come up with answers to fix that. And so that's what's making this election, I think, very scary for young voters, and kind of, I think young voters think, maybe if I just don't pay attention to it or don't vote, they'll just go away and someone will fix it. But that's not the case. And so,
What's sort of overwhelming when you're looking at such uncertainty now and you're looking at the big uncertainty in the future? Cynthia, that mirrors your thoughts?
Yes, and I think also in regards to education, when someone wants to pursue post-grad degrees, it's very, I need this to secure a good job, but it's going to cost me a lot. So it's a catch-22. Where do I go with my education, and how is it going to benefit me in the long run?
Well, what you're saying, the student debt just passed the $1 trillion mark nationwide. And in fact, some of your colleagues are still going to be paying on their college loans when their kids go into college. So how much has that propelled the education reform issues for those under the age of 30?
I think it's going to repel it a lot, especially when a lot of us start graduating again and they start realizing, okay, wait, it's been 10 years since I've been out of college and I still have these debts. And like you said, $1 trillion, it's the next housing bubble almost. If something's not done about it, you know, there could be another huge crash in the economy. And so it's going to be a huge issue, and I don't think young voters are so concerned with that $1 trillion mark because they don't really understand it right now.
Well,
but
it's just an amazing amount of money.
It's an amazing amount of money, but they just don't get it yet, and I think it'll take a few more years before they actually realize, oh, I still have these loans sitting around here. What are we going to do about this?
Would that stop you from going on to graduate school?
Well, the thing is, and I think I share this mentality with a lot of things, you invest in your education and there's no way for you to lose it afterwards. So it's not like a house, it's not a car, nobody's going to take it away from you once you have it. But is it worth it? Is it going to be worth it? That's the main issue here.
And like you said, I don't get the full impact when you're paying 25 years down the line and you're still paying off your college debt. And we've talked about a lot of issues now pertaining to the economy. What about affordable health care, though? How much does that play into your generation? You're young and healthy. Is that something that you're thinking about all the time?
It's not something I was always thinking about all the time. I think that in this election, it'll be an issue, of course. The Affordable Health Care Act is a hot topic, and it's one that a lot of Americans, you know, disapprove of. Young voters, I think, approve of it slightly more than they disapprove of it. There's a lot of things that were passed in that law that are kind of scary and that were not done correctly. And so, and Republicans come along and they say, oh, well, we're going to replace it, but what are you going to replace it with? We don't know. And so I think healthcare is another topic that's kind of up in the air right now. We don't know where that's going to go and which plan is the best plan for us moving forward.
So again, a lot of uncertainty with it. Ron Paul is a libertarian, and he played a role in the 2008 elections as well as the 2012 primaries. He garnered support from the younger voting segments. What is it about his message that draws millennial voters?
I think he proposes sort of a departure from the status quo that young people can relate to. We talked earlier about the disenchantment and disappointment. He offers, it's sort of like Ron Paul has a solution to all our issues because he offers this out there sort of policies that young voters look at and say, well, it's true. Even I'm surprised by the support that Ron Paul gets here in Central Florida, the Young Americans for Liberty. Large organization. And I wonder why, and that is why.
So you think that he's tailoring his message more specifically?
No.
I think he's consistent.
He's very consistent, and he just has he's a third party basically. I mean, we'll call him Republican, but he doesn't, you know, call himself a Republican even though he runs on that ticket, or a Democrat. And I think young voters are independent voters, and so he draws them in. And his idea of, you know, young voters are we know we're in a big mess and we just want to forget everyone else right now. We don't want to give all of our money to foreign aid or worry about fighting wars. And that's what Ron Paul's about. He's let's stay here, let's get things fixed, let's make things simple. And young voters like that because he's very simple and direct.
Well, do you think then we're going to see more of a trend towards independent registered voters and as a result more third-party candidates? I
think once our generation gets up into our 30s, 40s, 50s, I think we will see a third party emerge in this country, a viable third party. And what that will look like, I don't know. I mean, because we've had the Tea Party come up, which is third party. You've had Occupy Wall Street. You've had all these things that have come up, but they don't have enough support yet. And I think once our generation gets up into the older age brackets, that we're going to see a third party emerge because there will be so much more of us and we'll be so much more independent thinkers.
When you get mobilized a little bit better.
Yep.
Cynthia, let me ask you, a lot of people say with the job market and the economy still so dismal that there's so much less opportunity for young people. Do you still think that the American dream is there for you?
I do think so. I think that there are a lot of possibilities here regardless of how our economy has been doing that are not existent in any other parts of the world. That cannot be denied, and I think it's still there, and it's about the individual itself. The question is there enough for all of us to pursue our American dreams?
Salvator, you think the same?
I do. I mean, I think it's going to be a different type of American dream, you know, kind of 2.0. It's not going to be the same as our parents or grandparents. We're not going to have the same opportunities for sure to open new businesses because, you know, so many things have have everything.
Things are all changed.
Yeah,
yes.
And so it's going to be different, but I do think we're in the best spot in the world. If we want to become successful, we can.
Let me ask you a little bit more about social media then. When you're looking for sources for looking at candidate information or researching some of these issues, do you use that as a primary source?
I do not. I think social media is the last place to go to for looking up the issues, because anyone can go out there and say whatever they want, and I mean, young voters, you can't believe what you read on Twitter or what you read on Facebook. You have to go out and do the research yourself. And what I talk about in my book is mixing up your sources and getting more of a well-rounded view. Don't just listen to Fox News or CNN, listen to both and see what they both have to say, and where the stories cross is usually where the truth lies.
Right, we talked a little bit about that. Multiple sources are the safer way to go. Do you think that the candidates are adequately using social media, though, to reach out to your voting segment? Are they doing that effectively?
I do think so. I think they've done that this year more than I can even recall. And it's Facebook, Twitter, everywhere, face updates, everything. It's happening. And they are doing that for the young voters. But nowadays, I think social media has spread to other voters as well. So I don't know how that can counteract their reach.
Your generation, just from the way you're talking, it's so different than mine. When you hear campaign promises that can't be fulfilled, I'm going to end homelessness, how trusting is your generation?
I don't think they're very trusting anymore, especially after 2008. They are not trusting at all. They can say whatever they want up there on the debates or on the campaign trail on the podium. It's not going to register. Those grand promises are just, they're out in one ear, out the other. So.
Well, you made a point in your book, too, of saying that the millennials are much more educated and using that to sort of analyze what some of the responses and not just the banter with it. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that way, Cynthia?
I agree, and I feel that taking everything in that everyone is telling us left and right is also difficult, and I think that because of the banter, sometimes millennials choose to not listen to anything at all. Mm-hmm. And if I was, of course I am also a victim of all this banter, I would do the same thing. If I didn't, of course I'm a political science major and all that, so I do it. But if I was totally disconnected from that, then I would just close my ears.
As your generation ages, what is the Democratic or the Republican Party, what are they going to need to do to secure your vote?
As we age?
And you will age.
They're going to have to do a lot. They're going to have to stick with what they promise on the campaign trail. They're going to have to deliver it to secure our vote, and that's why I don't think both those parties have a good track record of doing that, and that's why I think a third party is going to emerge, and it's going to be from our generation that we're going to have a viable third-party candidate who's really going to step forward and not stand for the status quo and do what they say when they go to Washington.
Is that the model you see as well?
I see that happening, and I know that the issues that are pressing to us today, like we said, the economy, education, that is going to have to be fixed for us to take an approach in that regard.
Salvator, your generation again, you are representative of a very informed and engaged group, but you have a lot of peers that aren't. What's your message to them that would encourage them to vote and to become more involved?
That's been a difficult topic this time around, to get them involved and to get them to vote. They've been so apathetic this time around, and so it's really difficult because it's hard for me to do it alone. I guess the responsibility relies on the party to do it, a certain party or a certain candidate to get out there and get them energized. And so my message when I talk to friends who are disenchanted is that, yes, we've been let down a lot in the past, but, each election is your chance to change it. And, it might not work out again, but you have to just put your faith in the system and hope that it works out, because that's all we have right now.
And that's what you say in your book.
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia, you're a poli-sci major, so I'm sure your friends are ready to hear from you, or you tell them whether they should or not. But what's your message to them?
My message, and I say this all the time, is that you have to care, because public policy and what the policymakers create affects everything. And I say always, it affects the air that you breathe, literally. It affects every move, your lifestyle, everything, your education, your job, how you will be in the long run. It affects everything. That's why you should care.
Thank you both so much. Wise words from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you for tuning in to Metro Center Election 2012, and thanks to Salvator and Cynthia for joining us. Don't miss part 2 of our look at age in the election next week. when we'll examine the senior vote. Remember that Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th. To submit a question for future discussion, visit wucftv.org/election2012. I'm Diane Trees. Thank you for watching.
This program is made possible by funding from the UCF Metropolitan Center for Regional Studies, where government leaders, business executives, and academic experts come together to discuss major issues facing the state of Florida.